Hello, guys, and welcome back to our Computer Networks course. So, a little while ago, we talked about our header, right? We talked about our segment, right? But we skipped over one part, right? And that was our options, right? We said that there can be some special options, but we skipped over them, right? So let's discuss them right now. So there are two types of options, right? It could be a single byte thing or it could be a multiple byte, right? So for your single byte parts you only have two things, right? First is end of options. ठीक है, मतलब it basically means that this is the end of my options part. Everything else is something else, right? मतलब this is the end of options, there are no more options following this. ठीक है, that is what end of options list says. All right, so that was your end of options. Now you also have your no operation. Now no operation is nothing but padding. Okay, you are simply padding to make sure that the next option comes where it should, right? It doesn't come somewhere in between, right? It comes where it actually should and not in somewhere between, right? So that is what no operation is required for. Okay, all it does is it pads things up. Okay, so it is simply empty space. It is simply filling up empty space, right? That is what your no operation does. So moving on to our multiple byte options, right? So let's talk about our timestamp first. So timestamp is basically you give it a timestamp, right? This is most useful using during your SYN part, right? So you do, it is also useful for your acknowledgements, but we'll discuss that later. So for our SYN part, what happens is this guy is going to send a timestamp. Now this guy receives it and it knows that how much time was this, right? How much time did it take to travel from sender to receiver, right? So now what this guy does is he would add his timestamp and send an acknowledgement. Okay. So now I know when I sent it, when he received it, right? That is the timestamp that he added, and I also know the time at which I receive it, right? So I know the time that was your sender to receiver. Okay, I know the time that was your receiver to sender. Okay, this was your acknowledgement and this was your data. Okay, and this whole thing added together is your round trip time. That is what your round trip time is. Okay, this is what is used to decide your retransmission timer, right? If you remember, this is what is used to define your retransmission timer. All right, so this thing, your timestamp, is also useful to identify your duplicates, right? If it is the same sequence number with a different timestamp, it would be considered as a duplicate. All right, so let's move on to our next option. That is your maximum segment size, right? We discussed this a lot when we were discussing our sliding window, right? We discussed what our maximum segment size is, right? Right? You know what maximum segment size is? It is simply the biggest thing that can be accepted by your receiver, right? The biggest thing that your receiver can accept, that is your maximum segment size. It says, please do not send me something bigger than this. Okay, that is what your maximum segment size is. All right, so next we have our window scale factor. So sometimes the window, do you remember our header? Our header had a part where you could specify receiver window. Okay, this part where you could specify a receiver window, right? But sometimes this space is too small, right? You want a much bigger window, but you cannot specify that big of a window with just this much of space, right? So for that you would use window scale factor, right? So the way to use it is you would say the receiver window that is defined in your header. So receiver window from header into 2 raised to the power window scale factor. Second, so receiver window from your header times 2 raised to the power window scale factor. So that is what your receiver window would be defined as if you use window scale factor. Okay. So now we have discussed everything other than our SAC. So we discussed SAC a little bit before, right? But we did not actually discuss how SAC works, right? So let's do that. So during our sync phase, right? During our sync phase, when this guy sends a sync and this guy replies, during our 3-phase handshake, the host may, right? The guy who is initiating may include a SAC permitted option, right? And that says that we can use SAC, right? So this guy says SAC permitted, and if this guy replies with SAC permitted, then this whole communication can take place using your SAC. Otherwise, we would simply not be using our SAC. All right. So that was your SAC permitted. It is basically saying that, okay, SAC is permitted in this conversation, right? And this can only be done during our connection formation, right? During our sync phase. All right. So let's see how sync is actually used. So we talked about this before, but how your SAC is actually used. So we talked about this before, but SAC is not a replacement for ACK. It is what? It is additional information, right? You acknowledge something and you add some more information to that acknowledgement, right? That is what is happening there. So let's see. So what happens is you give it an acknowledgement, right? You give it an acknowledgement and you have some SAC options, right? At max, that is your 5, right? So you have size, you have length, you have permitted, right? And then you have 5, at max 5. Okay. So this is used to specify your out of order things, right? You can specify if something is out of order, okay? If something is lost, if something is duplicate, okay? And the way to do this is you give it an order. So let's see. So let's say I receive sequence number 1001, 5001. Let's actually do it this way. So 2001, 3001, and then I receive 5001 and then 4001, right? So these two are out of order, but these are in order, right? So what I would be doing is I would be acknowledging that I have received everything that you have said, and I would be giving it the order, right? So I would be saying 5001, then 4001, right? So I'm saying that you sent me, but you sent me this in the wrong order. Okay. So I'm informing the sender that these things were received, but they were received in the wrong order. Okay. So what about duplicates? So let's say I receive another 5001. So that would again be included here. So even though we are not acknowledging the second 5001, we would be, let's not take 5001, right? That is the last option. So let's, instead of saying 5001, let's say you have 2001, right? Let's say 2001. Okay, so that is what we would be doing, right? So we would know, you would be including 2000 up here as well, right? So it would become, let's see, it would become 2001, 3001, 5001, 4001, and 2001, right? So it is saying that you have received a duplicate, okay? Because it is mentioned twice, right? It is mentioned twice, so you have received a duplicate. All right, so that was for your duplicates. Similarly, there is also a method for lost packets, and that is you would give it what you have received, and you would say that this was, you would not mention something in between, right? And that would simply mean coupled with your acknowledgement, of course, right? You're coupling all this information that I'm giving you, all of these are being coupled with the right acknowledgement, right? So you would know that I have received everything, or I have only received up till here, or I have received up till here, but this was a duplicate, right? So I would know whether it is a duplicate, whether it is a lost package, or whether it is simply out of order, right? So that was all about SAC, and we are done with our options. All right, see you in the next course.